You're listening to The Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to Season 3 of The Girl Dad Show, where we explore the intersection of parenthood and entrepreneurial spirit. Join me and some incredible guests as we share tips and tricks for finding work-life balance and making a positive impact not only on the world, but also our families. Let's create a fulfilling life together. It's The Girl Dad Show, Season 3. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Girl Dad Show. Today I have Joey with me, who started off as interning at Goldman and Capital One, and then moved into an illustrious career at Palantir doing a ton of roles. And then he moved into Aon, one of the largest insurance agencies, and now embarked on his new endeavor, QuoteWell. Joey, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for seeing me on.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here because I know that you are a newly minted girl. I don't know if you're a girl dad. Are you just a newly minted dad? Boy dad.
Yeah, so newly minted dad. Newly minted dad. You know, when we first met, even 6 months ago, my wife was 8 months pregnant, and then I know posted on social that Rex was born, and you reached back out and said, "Hey, you know, you're welcome on the show now. You're newly qualified."
That's right. So, you know, you made it in life when you're on the Girl Dad Show. That's the barometer of success. You know, It's like it's what everyone aspires to. That's what I've heard. You know, no, all jokes aside, I know you're a newly minted father, but how's that going?
So his name is Rex. So Rex is awesome. You know, I think in terms of everything we would have expected from a baby. He slept through the night for a month before he hit that 4-month shelf that everyone was telling us about. All the smiles. You know, I think one little surprise. So my wife is blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm pretty much the exact opposite. So, dark hair, slightly darker skin, green eyes. And so, she was saying, you know what, maybe we'll have a blonde hair, blue eye baby. And I said, there's no chance.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, Rex popped out. And so he is a little blonde hair, blue eyed angel.
Oh, that's awesome.
But my parents looked and said, "Is this your child?" And we're like, yes, absolutely. And the one thing we can tell is that, I do have, good beard, furry arms and legs and things like that. And so does Rex.
Nice.
So we can tell, that's the one thing we can connect the dots on is, Rex is definitely your son.
That's great. I love it. So let's dive into a little bit about your professional career before we jump into the dad stuff. So talk to me about Palantir. I think Palantir is like one of those very enigmatic companies where everyone hears about them, but no one actually knows what they do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So they actually had no marketing, or really not even a sales team up until a couple of years ago and post going public.
Yeah.
But I found out about them in a pretty interesting way. So I got to our college career fair and I went to University of Virginia. For the engineers and, the big companies were there, Facebook, Microsoft, Google. Then there's this one random company that had the longest line and it was Palantir. And so then I tapped on the shoulder of the person in front of me and said, "Hey, do you know who these guys are?" And they said, "No, I don't." But the person in front of me said it might be the best company here. And so then I was waiting in this 30-person line, and I was late for a quiz even, but I got close to the front. And, talked to me for a couple of seconds. They said, "Hey, you know what? We're really only hiring for computer science majors." And I did systems engineering. And so I said, "Well, I do like baby computer science and some other things there." And I interned at Goldman as an engineer. I'm like, "Oh, all right, you might make it through." And then that was the start to the journey. And so I had no idea who they were, but they had a long line at a career fair and then kicked off the interview process from there. Worked my way in. And
so your introduction to Palantir was actually a long line.
Yeah. So it was just a long line in college. And then from there, did a little bit more research and similar to your approach, or perception. You go on Quora and everyone would ask, who are Palantir, but they have really hard interviews, but the offices are great. And then, I just kept in the process and, ended up there, I think. I actually applied for a summer internship and turns out for my role, they only hired 4. And so they said, "Listen, call us back for full-time in the fall." I reached back out in the fall, was fortunate enough to get the full-time offer. And then they actually offered for me to drop out of school.
Are you serious?
So,
wait, say that again. They asked you to drop out of school?
Yep. So they had just been, their commercial business was exploding. They were
Wow.
looking for talent, and it's very much a Peter Thiel company type approach where hire smart, dumb talent and see where things go. And so
Yeah.
they said they would let me finish my degree, which was nice of them. But then after, I said, well, yeah, I graduate on May 7th. They said, okay, can you start on May 8th?
Oh, wow.
And after I was like, well, I want to do this Euro trip with my friends. Can I maybe get a little more time off? And they said, we'll give you until like May 20th, but then we need you to start. And so I went back to the drawing board.
Very
I was trying to think,
aggressive.
what can I tell these guys that would let me start maybe in August or something along those lines? And one of my friends had started a nonprofit, started basically mentoring local communities close to college campuses. And so I said, listen, can I open up a branch in Charlottesville? And he said, sure. And so I went back to Palantir and said, hey, if I open up a nonprofit, can I get a few extra months? They said, sure. Yep. You have until October. And
Nice.
so then I ended up launching the nonprofit, going on my Euro trip, and then actually might be able to see in the corner right here. I actually went to bartending school with one of my best friends and got a bartending certificate, did that part-time while launching the nonprofit before starting up.
So you slammed in a lot of things in that 3 months. I love it.
Yep. So it was a very fun summer.
Yeah, but I feel like Palantir in itself would have been a fun experience because they, as enigmatic as they are and kind of as mysterious as they are, they got big really fast. Really fast. Yeah. I didn't know what I can tell you a fun story about, want to hear my Palantir story?
Yep. Oh, yeah. You know what? I think you might have actually told me this once before, but it's fantastic. So
Yeah, it's a funny story, right? Yeah. Oh, the Philz one. You heard it. Yeah, when we first met for dinner.
Go from the
Oh my God.
get-go, though. I think the fans will
Yeah,
like it.
I'll do the short version just for the listeners. But I was working at Philz Coffee, and Palantir calls. No idea what Palantir is or Palantir does. They're not really marketing themselves, and then their website's like, we do deep data and we visual. I don't know. It's like something's very ominous. It wasn't even like really clear what they did on their website.
We solve the world's hardest problems, and we are good with data. Probably something
Something like that.
science.
Yeah, it was like really ominous, and I'm like, okay. And they call and they're like, hey, we want to have a Philz Coffee setup in Davos, and I'm like, Davos, like the World Economic Forum Davos? And they're like, that's the one. And I'm like, oh, we don't like do that. And they're like, how much? And I'm like, no, it's not about money. It's like, we just don't have like the system or infrastructure to do that. They're like, no, like seriously, how much? And I'm like, I don't think you're listening to me. Like, we don't have a service to like build a random store for like 2 weeks and then like serve coffee in another country. We don't know how to do customs. We don't know how to get our equipment there. And they're like, just figure out a number and call me back. And I didn't call them back. They hung up. I didn't call them back, but they called me back 2 weeks later. They're like, what's the number? And I'm like, oh, you're being serious. And so I just gave them a crazy number. I think I gave them like, I don't know, I think I charged them like $100 a cup of coffee. And they didn't even blink. They said, okay, we'll see you in Davos. And I'm like, wait, what? I was just like, this is insane.
So
this is insane.
I'll tell you what that did though for the company. And this is, I wasn't one of the 30 people or so they sent, but everyone heard about, and Davos brings in heads of state, CEOs from the Fortune 500. Yeah, it's a pretty big event. And so, but everyone was talking about how the world's best cup of coffee was at the Palantir booth. And
really?
You had, again, like presidents and premiers from the EU going by to Palantir for the cup of coffee, and they might stand or stay there for a 5-minute sales pitch. And so it was worth the $100 per cup by far. So everything that they had done, and for those that don't know, Philz was basically in the bottom floor of Palantir's headquarters. And so that was very much, they had free coffee in the office. But if you want a good cup, you go to Philz. And so it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. That's so, in some ways, we're kind of like tied to, a similar story here. It's kind of awesome to have that crossroads. Yeah, so then talk to me about why you started a business, because it sounds like you had a very illustrious career. You got recruited straight from college into a really great company. Palantir is an obviously really, really strong company. Aon is also a really good company, very established. I'm curious as to what made you make the jump from that into entrepreneurship.
Yep. So one thing led to another, and I think the other thing, just to go back to, so my parents are both entrepreneurs. Very different
were they?
flavor. But my dad started a pawn shop when I was 1.
No way.
And so I actually worked there from when I was 6 until I was about 16. And so every weekend on Saturdays. And so, it started out as actually a bait and tackle store. And then they went from bait and tackle into more traditional pawn stuff. So hardware, tools, TVs, guitars, the whole gamut there. And then they had one jewelry case that ended up being by far the most profitable. So my dad said, well, listen, we should turn this into half of a jewelry store. Still doing pawn business, but, trying to cater more towards that type of product. And then my parents opened up a second store that my mom ran, which is still around today. So Tyson's Watch and Jewelry. If anyone's looking for a last minute holiday present, absolutely go for it. So they had the pawn shop for about 25 years. Then the jewelry store still around for 30. So I grew up working, seeing what they had to do to build their business. And so that was always something in the back of my mind is at some point maybe going to do my own thing. But then fast forward, went to college, went to Palantir. And then one of my clients at Palantir was a large insurance company. And so this was back in 2015 and basically had 3 large takeaways from the experience. I love the industry. I thought insurance was actually a fascinating subject matter. Probably doesn't have the right brand associated with it, but very fun.
You're the only person in the world that would say that, actually. But maybe there's 4 other people. But
yeah, maybe. But and so that's something that folks on my team say. Your job as the CEO is just trying to convince everyone that insurance is cool and fun, and it is.
My old CEO at Limelight would say the same thing. I think you and him are probably the only 2 people I know that actually say that out loud.
I'm happy to nerd out on it. I mean, it really is. At its limit, it should be one of the most data-driven, advanced industries out there.
It is. And
you even go back to so in the mid 80s, insurance companies were really some of those tech forward companies out there. They invested in the newest infrastructure. And then turns out the operations are so complicated, they just got frozen in those systems.
That's right.
And so it was interesting. You go back and they really were innovative, and then they stopped just because they were so hamstrung. But anyway, I digress. So
is that why they stopped building the technology? Because they built the infrastructure and they got kind of locked in, right? Because it's almost like impossible to unwind how fast they got distribution.
And it worked. Honestly, the systems were stable. I think a lot of the same like airline systems, similarly, like they were so core to the infrastructure where it was like doing open heart surgery on these systems. You're going to try and ship something. And so just the risk in doing that, well, they haven't really changed. But anyway, so I was on this large insurance client in 2015. And, first takeaway was I really liked the domain. Second was it was a sneaky large market, somewhere between 2 and 3% of GDP, depending on how you think about it.
Wait, national GDP?
Yep. And goes through insurance. So if you think of, I couldn't tell you exactly what the financial sector is, but insurance makes up a good chunk of that.
Wow.
And a lot of folks don't know, in terms of how Warren Buffett made most of his money, it was insurance.
Yeah, totally.
And so, you look at some of the big names out there, and so it's a sneaky large market. And then the third was the tech really wasn't great. And in particular, the data wasn't great either. And so, in recap, I liked it, big market, opportunity. Sounds like a place to maybe go and take my career in this direction at some point in time. And so wasn't ready to leave Palantir yet though. So I'd been waiting for my clearance for about 1.5 years, and wanted to go work in the DoD. And then 18 months later came back, and then finally got it. And then after that, went to go work on our special forces contract for about 1 year. Went to Afghanistan for a little bit, and did some really cool work. Past that, I probably can't talk too much about it.
That's really
but
cool.
If you Google Palantir Special Forces, I'm sure there's something that pops up on Google. And then after that, ended up going to Aon. And so I had seen a lot of different parts of Palantir, met a ton of amazing people. That is a lot of what Palantir's secret sauce is just really good recruiting. But and then went to Aon really just to learn more about the insurance industry. I had talked to some friends and family who said, listen, whether you go into private equity, you start your own thing, you just need to learn more. You're not fluent in the space yet. And so, if you go to one of these big agencies, that might be a really good spot just to get your fundamentals down pat. And so ended up at Aon from there, took 9 different insurance exams to get my what they call CPCU. So I'm a chartered property and casualty underwriter. And then after about 1 year at Aon, took a look at what's called wholesale broking, which we can unpack a little bit, and thought that'd be a really interesting opportunity to build a business around. And that was almost 3 years ago now. And then since then,
It's awesome.
Yeah, so started
So
the company.
you did a whole discovery before you even jumped into it. So you kind of decided that you wanted to do it, and then you found the job that would give you some experience and information and data collection.
Yeah, and I think the bigger thing is I didn't absolutely know if I wanted to do anything, and all I knew was that I really liked almost those big three things before, which was I love the industry.
Yeah,
it was a big market, so there was some opportunity there, and also a very well known thing in the insurance space is that there's a talent gap. There are a lot of folks in boomer generation that are retiring, and they're top-notch insurance talent. Millennials, not quite as much. So if you're willing to work hard and a smart person and just buckle down, you can do really well in the industry. And so I thought, no matter what way this pans out, it's probably a good move for me.
Yeah, I spent a few years doing Limelight Health, so employee benefit side, so not PNC, but we saw the gap coming in from that side as well too. There's no new blood coming in to fill in the ranks, and so you could see the lines deteriorating on this side, where you could see the silver hair generation starting to retire out, right? And so the gap kept getting bigger and bigger, and so I think technology is going to have to play a bigger force in that for sure across the entire insurance industry. It's just not something that's attractive to the next generation,
No. And honestly, like I mentioned earlier, I don't know exactly why, other than just poor branding. Compared to any other industry out there, the problems are interesting. It's very meaningful. We could go on a long philosophical debate in terms of what the role of government is, where I think the best line I've heard is that the U.S. government is basically a giant insurance company with a side business in defense. And so, so basically,
say that one more time, but slower. That's funny.
Yep. So, the best line I've heard about the U.S. government is that it's a giant insurance company with a side business in defense. And so, when people say, how is insurance important? Really, it's redistribution of, trying to mitigate risk in certain shape and forms through contracts. And to the extent that there's a lot of fun problems to dive through and actually make that a better process where, I hope that inspired a new generation.
Yeah, I hope so too, especially because the money part, right? Because there's a lot of money in insurance, like an unbelievable amount of money. And so, and there's really no competition trying to jump into the next generation. So you're really not fighting against anybody.
Yeah, I'd say that there's been this wave of insurtechs jumping in. The term was first coined probably in like 2016, 2017. Lemonade was really one of the first companies doing something a bit innovative in the space. Although the tech-fueled companies like Lemonade, we can go on a longer route in how that might be, giving the rest of insurtech a bad name these days.
Insurtech is great. Yeah, I think it's a very sexy industry. Yeah.
Yep. Where was I going with that? Lost my train of thought.
I was talking about the talent gap. You're saying that the insurance technology companies came in and started to fill in that gap.
Yep. So basically, there's this wave of insurtechs coming in, and they are taking different slices of different problems.
That's right.
But I think that something that we've found ultimately is that there's really two primary players in insurance. You've got the insurance carriers underwriting the risk, and you've got insurance agencies that help facilitate that risk. And then you also have ultimately customers who are buying both businesses and individual consumers to try to mitigate certain risk by buying insurance products.
Yeah, totally.
And so there are insurtechs that are selling to different parts of the ecosystem, primarily agencies and insurance carriers, to try and make some sort of improvement to the ecosystem. But the thing that I think a lot of insurtechs are running into is that the agencies and the carriers are both pretty price sensitive. And so when it comes to buying software, it's a really hard process. That, and also going back to what I said at the very beginning of this conversation around, it's like doing open heart surgery, working and trying to sell software in these insurance companies. There's a lot of risk involved from their end too. So if you've got innovation coming in, how do you ultimately end up making a difference if you can't price a product appropriately to sell into one of these institutions? Well, one of the only strategies that we found might actually work is going what we call full stack. So actually becoming an agency or a carrier. And that's what QuoteWell is. So we're actually, even taking a little bit of a step back. So QuoteWell is essentially a B2B marketplace. And so, speaking, in VC parlance, we sit in between insurance agencies and insurance carriers. And so insurance agencies need to get what they call appointments, which are basically the right to sell different insurance companies' products. And so now, not every insurance agency has an appointment with every insurance company. So there's this secondary intermediary that sits in between called a wholesale broker, where they process about 20% of insurance transactions today for business insurance. They act as like a clearinghouse.
Yeah.
And so QuoteWell is a tech-forward wholesale brokerage. And so we sit in between insurance agencies and insurance carriers to help them find specialty products.
Yeah.
But within all that, we thought for a while that we might, actually the first year and a half of our journey or so, we were building software potentially to help facilitate these transactions without actually being a fully compliant wholesale brokerage, and realized we wouldn't have legs to stand on unless we actually went full stack. So the past year or so, we've transitioned the business to that, to actually say, listen, we can control our own destiny now. We're not just a software company. We really are. It fits more into a tech-enabled services category.
Yeah. It's almost like you're playing that role, but you're being tech-enabled, right? And so you're at a competitive edge. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But that doesn't negate the fact that in the future, that gives you even more leverage to have market share to be for a software company. Exactly. If anything, it actually make you a software company faster because now you're generating the cash flow through the business.
Well, now you're cash flow through the business, and then we also have access to the problems right away. And so,
it's brilliant. Very smart.
About a third of the company is like an embedded insurtech, where we've got engineers, product managers, designers working towards building problems, both for the business and also for agencies and carriers. And then past that, we've got 2/3 of the business that's basically just a fully functioning wholesale brokerage. And so,
Joey, I love how clever you are. This is very, very smart. And you are obviously, people are going to have a ton of questions because I think we're flying by something very complicated and acting like it's normal, but this is not normal. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for you that you're going to get on social media to say, what is he talking about? Wait, slow down on that part. But it's very, very clever. I'm actually really excited because now I want to know about how, because if I know you can like parse out something so complicated and parse it out so simply inside of insurance, your brain is probably wired to create clarity. So now I want to pivot a little bit and ask you what your insights and thoughts are and what your approach is going to be to being a parent and for Rex.
100%. Okay. Well, I think the first and foremost, I couldn't be a half decent dad without an amazing partner. So my wife, Jenna, she's an amazing mother. And so I think that, and her company has given her fantastic maternity leave. I think one thing that I've just completely pivoted on in terms of, the U.S. compared to other countries actually giving more generous parental leave policies, especially for the primary caregiver. And I think for her, she got close to 6 months off. I think that's been amazing, both bonding time,
that's amazing,
and also given us, the support that we've needed in order to keep on, me trucking along building QuoteWell, and then for helping raise our child. And so Jenna being around, and then my in-laws also moved to Austin with us from New Jersey. And so they're very involved, help out 2 days a week. I think a fun little side story here. So my wife and I used to live in Manhattan. And then I was right before COVID hit, or right after COVID hit, we decided to move in with my in-laws in New Jersey. Funny enough, I had proposed to my wife 2 weeks before COVID started. And 4 weeks later, ended up moving in with my in-laws, which isn't usually what people expect after proposing to their future spouse. But moved in with them. And then after a month of living together, there was a house fire.
Oh, no.
And so everyone was fortunately okay. The 2 dogs got out fine, but then we lived in a rental house for about a year. And great rental house. Ended up meeting 2 of our best friends right next door who were sort of our COVID buddies. But then we had to move out of the house after a year because insurance not paying for it. And we said, listen, if we end up having a kid anytime soon, would you plan to move down to Texas with us? And they said, yeah, like what do you guys do in 2 years? We probably will. And we said, well, do you want to move twice in 2 years or once in 2 years? And they said, we'd like to move once. So we shoved everything on the same moving truck, came down here. And now they live up in Round Rock. So right around 30 minutes away.
Perfect.
So Mimi and Pop Pop are a huge help around a lot. And so having a support system there. And then for me, a lot of it is clear communication and setting boundaries with work. Making sure that I can come home and make sure that I take Rex whenever 6 o'clock hits and do, we like call it the bewitching hour. He might be crying a little bit extra right then. I'll try and take him away from Jenna, do whatever I can. And then really I just take orders from her. It's like, what can I do to be helpful? First and foremost to her, and also enjoy my time with him. And then I also make sure that in the mornings I'm typically first one on, so my wife can sleep in a little bit extra. So he's in a great mood in the mornings. So whether it's reading a book, we take a little walk around the house, do some tummy time with him, and the hour flies by. And so morning routine, nighttime routine, and then definitely weekend time.
Yeah, it sounds like you got it all mapped out. You got like a ecosystem play. You understand the time breakdown. You're understanding the benefits from the employer on the wife's side. It's great. What are your visions and aspirations for them? Do you have any of those yet, or are you at least inkling on some ideas of what you want them to be like? This episode of the Girl Dad Show is brought to you by Owners Club. As a business owner myself, I know firsthand how challenging the journey can be. Whether it's having someone that I can ask a very tactical question to, or just being able to share my big successes without guilt. Building a business is a lonely journey, and it does not have to be. After building and coaching dozens of businesses to success, there is one insight that is so obvious and simple, yet hard to execute. And that is, network equals net worth. And so if you're a growth-minded, supportive, smart, and hardworking business owner looking for a community of like-minded entrepreneurs to build with, look no further than the Owners Club. You will make lifelong friends and build your business that works for you. You can learn more online at owners.club.
You know what? It's less what I want him to do ultimately versus what I want to teach him. And ultimately, I'll be proud of whatever he does as long as he's happy. Barring, I'm sure certain activities and whatnot. But, if he were to go be an artist, if he were to go pursue sports, if he were, I'd be a traveling nomad, I'd be happy with any of the above. But, some of the things I'm really looking forward to, teaching him math, honestly. I'm excited to relearn calculus, trigonometry, all that stuff, and just nerd out and teach him. Honestly, that's one thing where, my parents cared a lot about my education and tried to help out however they could. But the help basically stopped at 7th grade before they said you're on your own. So for me, I want to be able to help Rex learn through high school and college, to the extent there's anything there I can relearn with him. Yeah. So I think that's exciting.
That's awesome. And those are great aspirations and goals. I love it. I love that you want to teach them, teach them math. I want to teach my girls music.
So tell me, so I flipped the question on you. So what do you think? Well, also your girls are older now, so they've got, their personalities are developing.
That's right. I have a 4 and 6 year old, so my kids are getting a little older, but I have the same sentiment as you do. Like, I think that making them happy is like the biggest thing for me. Is like, and same sentiment. Like, as long as it's not something illegal or they're harming someone, right? Like, as long as they're happy is really what's important for me. And if I had to say, just to say it, not that I would require it, but it would be something in music. I want them to be artists, and to be honest with you, like I'd be okay funding them for the rest of my life, to be like completely honest. And if they wanted to be an artist, right? I'd be very okay with that, because I just think that there's something really cool about art, and something that I wish I did when I was younger and kind of pursued that further. And so it's just kind of my personal desire, but my wife's more into sports, so they're always playing sports. And I finally talked my wife into like getting them on some piano lesson or voice lessons. So we're starting to integrate that, but it's been all sports since,
And this has been something that I didn't realize how much of a role the parents play in picking the kids' sports. Because ultimately, you don't sign yourself up for soccer. You don't sign yourself up for baseball. The parents pick the sports, and then how much, the kid might like it. yeah, that's up to them, but it's still a heavy influence. So for me, my mom was a
Totally,
star.
absolutely.
So
Yeah. Can I switch gears and talk about your childhood a little bit? Like,
Yeah,
were there
sure.
any major challenges that you had undergone, like that helped kind of form your thought process on work and life and how you're thinking about parenting?
I don't know as much as major challenges versus just principles. And so, I mentioned earlier, so I worked at my parents' store pretty much every Saturday for over 10 years. And so I started out picking up cigarette butts in the parking lot. I would Windex the showcases. Actually, I ran the bait counter, was my first big promotion. So I had a step stool, and they'd have night crawlers, minnows, and I had a little spreadsheet, and I'd punch in the numbers at the cash register. I get crazy looks from the customers saying, "Are you the person?" I'm like, "Yep, this is my job. Like, how many minnows can I get you?" And so, but I would walk out there, and when I was little, good day I might make $20, $40, being there 10 hours. And whenever I got over $100 all in, I would give it to my parents and say, put it in my bank account. And I didn't know what my bank account was. I just knew that that's where the money went. And then, honestly, when I was 15 years old, so my parents said, hey, listen, we're going to give you a debit card. You're responsible for everything that you need to pay for, whether you're going out with your friends or going to the movies, and your car insurance, which as a 15-year-old male was actually pretty expensive. And I said, okay, well, how much is in the account? And they said, $13,000. And so,
oh my gosh,
that was huge. That money floated me through college, honestly, for, as I continued working, keeping that up and down. But it taught me a lot around the value of work. And that, by the way, if you work, then you can afford certain things with that. While I think a lot of my friends are probably playing video games on Saturdays, I might have a basketball game, and then first thing I go to the store. Sundays were family time. But in terms of my free time, there wasn't a ton of it growing up. It was, I did school. On Saturdays, I worked. Sundays, did whatever we did with the family, and then we saw the repeat. And so I don't know exactly how I'm going to pull it off with Rex yet, but I want him to start working at a very young age. And if he starts his own lawn mowing business, if he does, something.
I love it. I had a guest on recently named John Pohl, and I'll send you the link after this episode here. You got to listen to him. He literally changed my life. So he's always posting photos. We've been Facebook friends for a long time. He's always posting photos of him with his kids and family. But I know for a fact that he owns like 2 delis, a construction business. Like he owns like 5 businesses, right? And I'm like, I know for a fact you're busy. How are you like constantly with your kids? And as I had him on the show and I asked him, and he's literally like, I just bring them. I'm like, what do you mean? There's no complicated, elaborate answer. He's like, no, I just bring them with me to work. And I'm like, so what do they do? And they're like, they work. And I'm like, what do you mean they work? They're like, you mean like she sits at the register at the cafe, like rings people out, 11-year-old? And she's like, yeah, what is she not going to learn in a business setting that she's going to learn at school? Like, it's the exact same thing. Yeah, sure, it sucks to pull her out of school, but like, they're going to get education from being in business. Yeah, just bring her to everything. Bring them in everything.
Honestly, and one of the best things that my parents did for this is I worked off commission for a couple of years at the pawn shop. And I was in a Spanish immersion program at the time. And so my Spanish was okay, but my dad, who doesn't speak a lick of Spanish, said, yeah, you got to talk to him in Spanish. So like, don't try and do English. And he just watched me from the other side of the store. So I had to work on how do you approach a customer? How do you negotiate? And, even then, sneaky thing about pawn shops, you'd have these big star tags on all the pawn shops, and they'd show a price on there. Then there's a little code beneath that. The code translates to how much you actually might have paid for something.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
You basically knew what your range was to say like, hey, this is $1,000. Yeah, you might have only paid $500 for it. So that means that, listen, we got to make a 20% margin. You can't go below 600, but everything in there, just start playing with it. And so negotiating skills, customer service, going out of your comfort zone, all of those are a lot more applicable to business than maybe,
absolutely. It's absolutely. I love that. Yeah. I think if you can figure that out and how to integrate that with Rex, I think he'll be much better set for it. And I absolutely think there's a lot of value into how you were brought up that helps you think about like your business success and the way that you've navigated it. I think it's super important that you consider all of those things that your parents did for you, for your kid. You know what I mean? Super
100%.
powerful stuff, man. That really helps me understand the next set of questions, but I'll ask it anyway. So, what are some of the core values that you want to inherit and you want Rex to own as he grows up?
Yeah, I mean, hard work is one of them. Failure is okay, honestly, and I think those go hand in hand.
Nice.
That's
a good one.
And that's something that, it is difficult for a parent to stray the line between, I think, both building a loving relationship with your child and raising a great child. And the answer, you have to do both. Do you want to be, their best friend? And do you want them to respect you? And the answer is both, throughout all of that. And so, to the extent that I want to both develop the relationship with Rex so that he can trust me with whatever however I can help him in any shape or form in life. And also on the, raise him the right way. There's going to be a lot of aspects of that. It's going to be, you got to work hard. You got to finish your homework. Yes. Use your manners. All the basic pieces here where, if you just fall into one camp and forget the ladder, then, you walk out the other side and that would be failure in my mind. In either shape or form. It's, you develop the, Nobel laureate, but you don't talk to your, don't have a great relationship with your kid. Not worth it. You have a fantastic relationship with your kid, but, they fall into that 10% of jobs you really don't want them doing, or, they're struggling themselves, then, also probably not great. So how do you stray the line between both of those? That I think is really going to be the challenge and also the fun part of parenting.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I know that you just became a dad, but based on your limited scope of experience here, do you have any advice for other soon-to-be parents?
I don't know as much as advice versus, one personal experience that I can share that it might help a couple soon-to-be parents. Rex was born 6 weeks early. And so ended up doing a C-section. And ultimately he was okay, but he was small, just a little over 4 pounds. But while I think there is typically a lot of fear in the NICU, when I saw him come out and he cried, I didn't care. The fact that he was alive and in good care was all that really mattered then. And there's one story, and I'm sure he might listen to this podcast at some point, but one of my best friends growing up, him and his wife unfortunately lost their first as a stillborn. And I think that, thankfully, they've had their second successful child now. But seeing that, I think that set the floor for me for anything past this, as long as I have a breathing child on the other side, like we'll get through anything. And so, I had parents reaching out to me in contact and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I know Rex in the NICU. And I'm like, he's fine. He's got doctors all around him. He's, he's on the CPAP, but, the doctor's saying every day he's getting better. And I never worried, actually. And so I think part of it is just putting into perspective the chance that you have at a child's life there. The fact that Rex was doing well, and even though he was in the NICU, I was incredibly thankful. And so now coming on the other side of that, I think, it was a little crazy. He did have maybe a couple episodes here or there, but the doctors were all around him, and I never worried. And so I think just having that perspective and baseline, if I can impart that on other parents, saying, you still have a lot to be grateful for, and like they'll get through it, that might help. And also the people in the NICU are just, they're angels. They are
incredible team. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, just to kind of wrap this up, do you have any like really fun or memorable things that have happened since Rex has been born, and both in the business and or as dad?
Let's see. So my wife and I have very different tastes in television. And so anything that is sci-fi related goes into the do not watch category. So I've been building this list, and also building a business, there's not a ton of time watching TV. But turns out when you're feeding a baby at 3 a.m, and you want to put something on in the background, that's the perfect time.
Yeah.
So Rex and I watched a lot of Star Wars. So all the stuff on Disney Plus.
Nice.
Together.
Nice.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, we're going through right now, is something that's been Rotten Tomatoes 100 score. But just silly cartoons that you don't have to concentrate too hard on the middle of the night. And so just us having our goofy TV time, I think, is a very special thing for us. And then what else do we have? We have a chocolate lab named Bourbon. And I think
you have a dog too. I love it.
So
great.
So when I met my wife, we were in New York, and we went on our first date, and she said, "Oh, I have a dog." And we meet most people in New York. When they have a dog, it's a Chihuahua or a French Bulldog, maybe the
tighter
largest.
living quarters. I get it. Yeah.
And she said, "No, I have a chocolate lab." I'm like, "Oh, you have a big girl dog." And so
chocolate lab named Bourbon.
Lab named Bourbon.
If that's not a selling point, I don't know what's a selling point.
I know. It was like, I got the best 2-for-1 deal out there that I possibly could. So, but Bourbon predated me. And so, but she's fantastic. But she's been an only child for a while now, and we didn't know how she was going to react to Rex being around. Yeah. And I think a very similar, sentiment that a lot of other dog owners have. And so, when we brought Rex home from the NICU, we were like, all right, well, how's Bourbon going to react? And she was a little indifferent. But over the past 5 months or so, we've gotten all the photos together. Like, Bourbon sits and snuggles next to Rex as much as she wants to snuggle next to Jenna and I. So just, some very good moments in there.
That's perfect.
And then there's one thing that, depending on when this airs, I might be able to pull this off before my wife finds out. I want to put a little bit of peanut butter on Rex's face next to Bourbon and just see how crazy Bourbon goes after licking his face, and he'll just be sitting there. So I'm planning to do that next week with my parents in Colorado. And so, I'll take a video of that and send it to you once I get that through.
Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, please, please, please. All right. Well, let me ask you one more question before I let you get out of here. Favorite book that you would recommend, either for parenting, life, or business? Yeah.
So I think there's two. And I don't know if they've been recommended on the podcast before, but one is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yeah.
So there are, I'm sure, a million books on negotiating tactics out there. I think that Getting to Yes was a very popular one that business schools taught for a while. Never Split the Difference, I think, is probably the newest one in that vein. But it's the one book I've reread 3 different times. I write in the margins. And it really does talk more about not getting what you want, which is what Getting to Yes really does, but really, how do you mediate a problem together? How do you work to collectively solve and bridge the gaps between different parties? And so as a leader in any shape or form, or even in a relationship, in a marriage, it's not mind tricks. It's really just trying to listen and understand and pick something apart in the right way to make sure that you can get to a good outcome. So Never Split the Difference, probably number one. The second, which is a very long, thick book, but Thinking Fast and Slow, is one of the, I think, tenets of behavioral economics, where there are 3 chapters or 3 segments to it, and there's one big lesson from each chapter. I could rattle off at least all 3 of them right now if I needed to. But for each of those lessons, there's 150 pages of pretty dense research and experiments that they go to back it up. But it really does dive into just how do people think? How do you perceive the benefit of something, the pain of something? How does that change over time? And so it really does get into, again, more of the psychology of how people think, that I think had a really impactful or really big impact on me and how I approach life in general.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And I think that maybe just like one part, I think this is chapter 3 of Thinking Fast and Slow, but they ran an experiment across, hey, listen, if we were to give someone a little shock, like, on a 0 to 10, if you were to give someone a little shock, like a 3 or a 4 repeatedly, would you prefer having that over the course of an hour, or having 110 shock. Doesn't kill you, but 110 shock, and it lasts a quarter of a second. And pretty much everyone prefers just having the 4 on there, but everyone registers the 10 and actually remembers that experience, much more viscerally. There's a much more positive way to apply that experiment to everyday living, which is, hey, listen, if every day you're just going to go about and live a normal routine, how much of that are you going to remember? Is your brain actually going to retain over time? Versus, try and make those big experiences. Try to make something that much more special. Try and go for that 7 or an 8. And if you do, you actually retain that memory better. And so to the extent that it might take extra effort, but if you can actually get to an experience that is, the high's higher there, then you're going to cherish the memory that much more. And so, I think the way that I'd apply to that is, if you could have, 3 smaller vacations versus 1 big vacation where, you're really building up to a lot of it, you might remember the one big one more over time. Those memories are worth a lot. And so for me, I think that particular chapter resonated a lot for me to say, hey, listen, what can I chase here? What should I be building towards? And it's go for the big swing, chase the big thing. For the mediocrity of things, maybe not worth it.
It's awesome.
And so,
it's incredibly insightful way to think about it. That is not what I thought the lesson would have been from that story. So I really appreciate that. That's very interesting.
I landed the plane, hopefully in a more positive note there.
No, it's great. It's actually a really, really thoughtful insight. And I think that I actually agree with it. I think that that's actually the right way that I would want to live. And when I think about how I perceive that. So thank you for sharing that. I'll have to check that book out. It does sound like it's a really long one, though. How long is it?
It's a long one. You have to settle down. But a little bit here and there. And if you're ready before bedtime, you might get a little sleepy. I'd say read in the morning after a cup of coffee.
There you go. Joey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show. It's been wonderful getting to know you a little bit better, and congratulations on Rex.
All right. Well, much appreciated. I'll see you around else and sometimes it.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Girl Dad Show. Please take a moment to follow us on social media. You can find us at The Girl Dad Show on all major platforms. We look forward to staying in touch and keeping you up to date with all the new guests that are coming out.